Welcome to Color Me Mama, the podcast in which Black moms are celebrated, encouraged, and inspired to color outside the lines. I'm your host, Ashley Shante, and head mama in charge. I'm happy you have joined me for another episode. Let's chat. Welcome to Color Me Mama podcast. I am Ashley Shante, a Black mama, a wife, a friend, a sister, a community member. Most importantly, to this podcast, I am host of the Color Me Mama podcast, a podcast where all are welcome who color outside of the lines of society's construct of motherhood, right? For those that are new to this podcast, I welcome you. Those who are homeschoolers, are living abroad, are doing something out of the ordinary, and you are a Black mother, I welcome you. For those Color Me Mama listeners that are always here and here to support, I welcome you back. So thank you. Today, I actually want to talk about something that really is a kind of a coming out party that I haven't shared with any of you, and certainly also even not with a lot of people that are even close to me. So here it is. I want to embrace, inform, and bring awareness to this topic. I am an awesome mom. And by awesome, I don't mean AWESOME. Awesome as in AUSM. I am a mother of an autistic child. And, I was recently, because I am a part of an autistic parenting group, and the discussion was really around destigmatizing autism. And for me, one of those very important areas where I feel like, everyone is not on the same side of the fence with this, and all is welcome as far as how you feel about it, where some parents feel like, oh, I don't want my child to have a label. I don't like labels because, I know my child is autistic, but I don't like to say they're autistic because then that comes with some type of assumption from the outside world or from society. For me, I feel like I embrace the label because the more labeled children and people, adults that you meet that are autistic, for the uninformed, that starts to inform you that, hey, if you've met one autistic person, that means you've met one autistic person. So I feel like it's important for us to label so that so that it can become destigmatized, because I think a lot of times when people think of autism, they think of the one child that they've met or experienced, or one adult that they experience. And autistic people are not monolithic. I compare it a lot to, I compare it like going to a buffet, right? You have all these people that are at the buffet. So they do have some commonalities, right? They all have plates on their table. They are all sitting, on the same color chairs. They may, at this table, there may be a couple people that have French fries. On the next table, there may also be a couple people with French fries, but also French fries and sweet potato fries. There may be a mix. Some people may not have fries on their plate at all. And I think that's kind of the way that I express it, or explain it rather, because not all of the autistic kids are created the same. So in the autistic community right now, which I hope that it will evolve, they have it really, if you and first of all, let me back up. To be autistic, or to identify as autistic, I don't believe that you need to be officially diagnosed. I do think it helps. For some people. In our case, we did get our son officially diagnosed, which I'll get more into that very soon. Um, but if you do go and get officially diagnosed by a professional, it's on a scale of 1, 2, 3. And they have that ranging where 1 being at the mildest and 3 being more pronounced, let's say. So someone on a scale of a 1 will have probably less support needs. They don't require as much support as someone that may be on a 3. Also with autism, there you can vary on the scale. There may be a specific area, maybe speech, that you need high support at, but as far as like your motor skills, maybe on a higher level. And so a lot of times what they'll do is tally that up, and that's how they get on the scale of 1, 2, and 3. In my son's case, my awesome boy, he scales kind of in between a 1 and a 2. So usually someone that is mild does require some type of support, and it's varying degrees of support that they may require, but they can often, kind of go where to an outside person may or may not be aware that they're autistic if they're not looking close enough. Where someone on the scale of 2 is more so from the outside world. Someone could like look along, or if they have a conversation with you, they're like, okay, yeah, I see it. So my son actually kind of skates in between both of those, in between a 1 and a 2, where there are some things, some of his behaviors and speech patterns. If you have enough conversation, or you're around, for more than 5 minutes, I think you'll quickly be able to pick up, okay, yeah, I see that. But then in some areas, you may totally go unnoticed, right? So my journey, with autism actually began before I was a mother. To be very transparent with you, a child having autism was actually one of my worst fears. And interesting, I have a child with autism. Some theories may say, like the Bible says, the thing that you fear the most is, come upon you. Could be, or I don't look at it at all in a negative way. But I had watched a documentary at the time that was really following the lives and giving a voice to parents whose children, had been vaccinated, and that they had noticed a huge differentiation between their child and really a regression in their child pre-vaccination and post-vaccination. And it had such a profound effect on me. It really broke my heart for those stories, those real life stories. And I know this is a very controversial topic, but this was their story and their story to tell. And it did have an effect on me, so much so that I had made a decision long before having children that I was like, yeah, if I could really prevent doing that, I'm gonna take another route. And not at all because I'm an anti-vaxxer. And see, that's one thing I don't like about our society as a whole, right? A lot of times we don't give people, and we don't give nuance to beliefs and why people believe things. We usually just feel like it's so black or white, like either you're pro this or you're anti that, and not quite in the middle. Or people are often not even interested in the why that you may not want to do something. So I can only speak for myself. I am a person, and have always been, and I pride myself upon this. I don't press go on things that I don't understand, right? Now that's outside of my own beliefs of lean not to your own understanding. I'm not even talking about spiritually. I'm just saying, if 1 + 1 is not equaling 2, and you tell me 1 + 1 And I've known all my life of 1+1 = 2. And then someone comes along and tells me, no, 1.1+1 = 3.5. I'm going to be like, well, no, because I'm not wrapping my head around how does it all of a sudden equal 3.5. So in my case, for me, the reason why I stray away from vaccinations in general, not just childhood vaccination, but just vaccinating in general as an adult. I mean, I was vaccinated as a child, not having a choice and not, whatever. But as an adult, because every human being is different. We're not all created the same. Case in point, why would me weighing about, I guess I weigh about somewhere around 120 something pounds, right? And I'm like 5'1". My age, taking in consideration my age, my blood type, my medical history, for example, I have asthma. Why would you take me and then let's say this man that's 55 plus with a history of congested heart failure, who's O positive blood type, and the list goes on. I don't understand why him and myself would get the same exact vaccine. That's what's always twisted my head up on that. So that is my reasoning. So for me, I was always like, well, I'm not going to have my child get something that's a one size fits all. That's strictly for preventative measure of something that may hopefully never happen, right? So that's my personal belief. I believe that people should be able to do, as long as it's not illegal or anything like that, people should be able to do whatever they want to with the child they have brought into the world. That's my belief, and I stand 10 toes down on that, especially for Black moms, right? So anyway, long story short, I'm bringing this up because I want to color the conversation and the information more around autism, because a lot of times these days, in particularly people that are, anti, vaccination, when you say your child is autistic, I think a lot of times it's assumed of, oh, it's that shot. Oh, it's the shot. You must gave it a shot. And I also want to prevent other mothers from feeling judged or attacked or like it's somehow their fault, whether they did or whether they did not. So I want to bring awareness to, my son was never vaccinated, not a drop of anything, never vaccinated, right? My son always checked all the boxes at all of his milestones. He always met his milestones. Now like I said, I had a child in the height of the global pandemic. My child was also a NICU baby because he was born severely underweight. I had preeclampsia. He was born at low birth rate, and it was the scariest time of my life by far. Having to tread on these waters that are completely uncharted territory for me, also taking in consideration that I had deep anxiety around hospitals. I didn't even want to, like, my birth plan was not to give birth in a hospital, but that obviously went out the window once having preeclampsia, right? But because he was born low birth weight, he was about, I think he was 3 pounds, 10 ounces. He was under 4 pounds. And so they kept him in the NICU doing every test imaginable, testing for this, testing every day. They were telling me, oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe it's this, whatever. Thankfully, by the goodness of God, that, he just was low birth weight due to, the condition of me having preeclampsia. But then, went home and whatever. So I guess the biggest difference with my son has always been tiny. I mean, genetically, I'm I've always been tiny, though I'm much bigger than I've ever been since having kids. And my husband is also more on the petite side as well. Um, but anyway, my son always met his milestones outside of being like a little bit, underweight considered. And that's another thing. These scales with this weight, um, you know, I, it's said that the generic amounts for weight. I'm not talking about his newborn weight because that was low, but I'm talking about after that, that they're not really done with like black people in mind of the weight. Like we have different body types, we're built different, all of that. But anyway, all of his developmental milestones were always met up until the age of 3. So there wasn't anything where it was like, oh, he's not saying words, he's not making eye contact or anything like that. It was around the time that he was 3. Now, mind you, a child that is born in a global pandemic is not having nearly as much socialization as the average child their age. So my child was not, my child never went to daycare, wasn't in school. We had a nanny that came, and she would take him to the playground, occasionally, and then obviously still because it was COVID, there was always like keep a distance kind of from other kids. So it really wasn't until, to be honest, that he was 3 years old where the world was like fully really back open again, where people were, feeling safe to be close to one another. And so I kind of recognized around that time, like, okay, socialization. I would notice like on the playground, he would tend to, like, if there were toys that a lot of kids were playing with, he would just gather up his portion of toys and take them over to the corner. And me, I'm like, oh, that's me in there. I don't, I'm kind of, choosy about, who I have in my space, that kind of thing. I'm just thinking, that's what it is. Because also, a note, my son was reading like a 5 to 7 year old. I'd say probably like maybe even probably a 7-year-old. He was reading at 2. And what I mean by reading, yes, reading like out of his books, sight words and stuff like that, but also reading like we would be passing, like from his car seat, we would be passing by signs and he'd be like, Red Lobster, Publix, whatever, I want to go to whatever the sign says. And, it was always so fascinating for my husband and I. It was something that we were proud of for sure. I mean, we had a nanny that happened to also be a former teacher. And so she, every day she was like teaching him the sounds of the vowels and all of that and things like that. So we just thought, okay, yes, this kid he's very smart. And rest in peace to my grandmother. Around the time my son was like 3 months, she was already calling him a genius. And I just thought it was a funny thing. Grandmas always think, their kids are the sun, moon, and stars. And so that's kind of how I thought about it. But then, I was like, okay, yeah, he just learns really, really fast and he's highly intelligent. But then my husband and I started realizing, he was drawing on walls, he was drawing on furniture and stuff like that. But I mean, like, obsessed. And that's also like why you shouldn't judge, when people are like, oh, I would have beat his so-and-so, or he should, or you're doing a horrible parenting job, he's drawing, or he's doing, that kind of thing. It's actually, we realized and the dot stars started pointing to hyperlexia. He was obsessed with the alphabet, like absolutely obsessed with the ABCs. So for most children with hyperlexia, it's usually either alphabet or numbers that they are really, really drawn to. Some children do mathematics really early and have an obsession with numbers. He liked numbers, but his obsession really was the alphabet. And still to this day, he just turned 5. Like, he's obsessed with letters, right? And so we were like, okay, hyperlexia. We are confident. That was the first time we were like, oh, he definitely has hyperlexia. But even with hyperlexia, there are, I think it's like a scale of like a 1, 2, and 3 that they do that just because you have hyperlexia doesn't mean that you're necessarily on the spectrum, but most likely you are, all of that kind of thing. So we were like, okay, that's one area we know he has, but whatever, we went on. And also too, there's not like a whole lot of information out about hyperlexia, like there is about like dyslexia. Hyperlexia is a ever evolving condition where people are learning more about it, and science is giving more information about it. So it was probably around the time that he was 3, when we were in our neighborhood back in America. We were going to the playground more, and I took him to the playground one day, him and his brother, and this other little girl that was the same age as him. The things that she was saying, like, she was so loquacious. And I do realize that girls and boys, you really shouldn't compare them, even when they are the same age. And truly, you really shouldn't compare children, because all children aren't like the same, even if they have the exact same birthday. Like, they're just different in their milestones and development. But I did notice that she spoke a lot more than he did. Like, she was like, "Oh, Mom, yeah. I don't want that one because that's not my favorite. My favorite color is this. And I want, in more in rounded ways than my son spoke. My son has always spoken in more matter of fact. And at the time, at 3, he would say like, juice, 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 juice. And, I'd be like, okay, no, how do you ask Mama for juice? And he'd say, "Can I have juice, please? Can I have a cookie, please?" And so my husband and I at the time were thinking, okay, so it's just more of like, I don't want to say laziness, but just, yeah, really, like he's taking the path of least resistance to get what he wants. Like, juice, juice, just get it to me. And he doesn't want to take the time to say, "Can I have juice?" Because when I would ask him to say, full sentence, he would articulate it just fine. But then we noticed, like, no matter how many times we would have to like keep telling him, and he would keep doing it. So we were kind of like looking at that, like, okay. And see, for me, for what I knew about autism and why it's so important that I share this, because there are so many different faces and behaviors of autism that people are not aware of. And I'm very happy that in the autistic community, those individuals with higher needs, that are needing, even more support, I think, are often maybe more visible, or there's maybe a bit more awareness about it. And so I think even myself, it didn't, like, all flags were not pointing to my son definitely had autism, because for me, my thoughts around autism were that, you're pre-verbal, meaning that you don't have any speech yet at all, meaning that your physical movements are more of like flapping your arms or repeated movements of moving back and forth, that, going out in public, that headphones are a must because obviously of those sensory issues, with needing headphones. So that's the way I thought of autism, in a very one note way. And so because my son didn't cross all of those boxes, because he was speaking and he did have speech, I was like, okay, it's not that he's nonverbal. We were going in environments that, were varying degrees of volume. And at the time, I didn't like pick up that, oh, maybe he's sensitive to the volume or anything like that. He was eating, because one of the characteristics of autistic kids is often they are what they call a picky eater, but it's really because they have food aversions. It's the texture of the food. It might be the smell of the food, that, their senses are incredibly heightened, right? So to the 5 senses, to taste, smell, hearing, feeling, sight, they're really heightened to that. And so he was eating all the things. Like, I was chef mama, okay? He was eating salmon, he was eating chickpeas, he was eating, quinoa. He was like eating all the things, but it really was around maybe about, I'd say three, yeah, around three, where it was like, okay, he only likes spaghetti. He only wants pizza. He only, where it started to be more of a challenge. But then I would ask the doctor, and then that's the thing, those kind of things check off with kids in general, where around the age of 3, where they start kind of rejecting vegetables, and I only want, starchy foods and that kind of thing. So it was kind of really hard to pinpoint necessarily. Um, it wasn't really until our move to being on the continent of Africa that I think I was able to really fully become more aware that he's autistic, but also embrace it. I think it was happening at the same time, because when we came here, for one, I finally felt safe to put him in school. That was a deal breaker for me, to be honest, in America, because that, our country is still in, a real mess around gun violence, that I didn't feel safe sending him to school. So now that I'm now in a country where gun violence isn't, awry, and it's just, something so common, it's very uncommon here because it's illegal for a pedestrian, just a common citizen, to have a gun. I felt comfortable to send him to school. And so he's now going to school. And so with attending school, that's when things could start to open up. Even his teacher. So when I talked about before, between the scale of a 1 to 2, his teacher at first was like, I don't think he's autistic. I just think maybe he has Asperger's, which Asperger's now is an outdated term, and, is linked into being a part of the spectrum. But she had, she was like, okay, maybe, it's just a social thing. And then things started to develop more and more, and we started realizing, okay, yeah, there's something there. So I knew by this time that he had hyperlexia. I knew that he had food aversions. I knew that socialization was still a challenge for him, but it was hard to pinpoint because it wasn't consistent. Like, yeah, he'd go to a playground and not want to play with anyone. And then sometimes he'd be in spaces where he'd really just be over affectionate, and he'd find one kid that he really, really likes. Then also he has his brother at home, who he's socializing with. So then it was, okay, we know he's hyperlexic, and we know that he's speech delayed. Like, we were like, even though he can repeat, that was the other thing, echolalia. So I would notice if I would say, no, baby, how do you ask? He would repeat, how do you ask? And I'd be like, no, you need to say, can I have such and such, please? And he would repeat that. But I was noticing, myself and his dad were noticing, he literally is repeating everything we're saying. So I Googled that. Why is my child repeating everything I'm saying? Didn't know it was something behind that, echolalia. So now we were able to say, okay, he checks all the boxes for having hyperlexia, echolalia, these two things for sure, without a doubt. So we were like, okay, he's a part of the neurodivergent community, because there are a couple of things here, So we put him in speech therapy. That's when the speech therapist was saying, okay, he's a Gestalt language processor. He learned, and it's like, the funny thing is, like, when you have kids, you thinking about, am I having a boy or a girl? I want them to be healthy, but there are so many things that you just don't prepare for as a mom. Like, learning language, I didn't even know that there are different ways that children process language. And one of them, he's a Gestalt language processor, where he learns languages more in chunks and in phrases, and then breaks them down later. So then that was an area. So we started, instead of getting him tested for autism first, we actually just individualized and customized what were his specific needs. Okay, we see him going to school. What type of school would be good for him? His senses. a school that, allowed him to be free, where there is structure, but not so much of a confinement to a seat and sitting straight and looking up, that fit him. And so I'm bringing this up to just say that I want to inspire and really encourage any mothers that may have recently got an autistic diagnosis for your child, or they're on the spectrum in some form. It can be incredibly overwhelming. And instead of attacking it, or addressing it rather, as a whole, address the things that are most urgent one at a time. So for myself and my husband, we are big communicators. And so we were like, it's going to be very imperative for him to be able to communicate effectively and verbally. And so we want to enhance his verbal skills. So we put him in speech therapy, and that has been working out wonderfully. We see the improvements that he's made by leaps and bounds. Those were really around the areas. It was around his speech. So that has helped a lot with the echolalia and the learning about the Gestalt language processing. A lot of times what we don't realize as parents, it's about our learning as well. Like me identifying, okay, he's a Gestalt language processor, helped me understand the way to communicate with him, right? Then I ended up in a neurospicy parenting group. Being a part of a neurospicy parenting group, when I tell you guys, baby, if you are an awesome mom, you an awesome dad, you an awesome auntie, awesome grandma, get yourself in a neurospicy support group, baby. Because what it does, you are carrying, when you have an autistic child, even whatever degree they are, you may or may not be aware of a clenching that's happening inside of your chest, because there is a sense of feeling alone in a society that was not created for people on the spectrum. So when you're going out to restaurants, you're going out to the mall, you're going out, we still, though there is quite a bit of awareness around autism, we still have ways to go. I mean, shoot, I have an autistic child living in my house that I birthed, and I'm no expert, right? I'm still learning. Experts are still learning about this and evolving. But what being a part of a support group does, I kid you not, even when you are not with those people, with that support group, they are still with you. So when you find yourself at a birthday party and maybe your child is having overstimulation from a sensory overload, and they may be having a meltdown, or you find your child at a playground and you find that they're not interacting with the other kids as much as, like in my case, I have 2 children, so I do witness the way that sometimes, to be honest, my youngest is embraced in ways that my eldest is not, by adults and children, just because to be honest, it's just easier for the average person to interact with my youngest. I call him the mayor because he's very social. He's very, embracing and engaging, where my eldest son, he's more of an acquired taste. And that goes both ways. It's usually not where, because people are drawn to him, but it's usually where he's like, back up, give me 50 feet. I need a minute. Oh, your perfume too strong, you talking too loud, you could tell where it just takes him, a minute to decide. And then also, one thing I love about him is he's an empath. So he really picks up on people's energy very strongly. So it takes him longer, and then for some people, he's like, you my people, right away. But it's a luck of a draw, more so with him. And so anyway, what I'm saying, when I find myself in environments where I may be feeling like, I'm in a place where people don't really understand what it's like to have autism or to have an autistic child, I go back and I think of that support group. I'm like, oh, Susie Q, Mama Susie Q in my support group, Daddy Bob, this one, that one. Like, I'm literally, these are fake names, of course, but I'm literally seeing the faces that I'm talking about. When I'm not with those people, I'm like, oh, if they were here, they'd understand, because I know wherever they are right now, at a different birthday party or at a mall, at a restaurant, they may be experiencing some of the same challenges I do. And it helps you not feel, because when you do get the diagnosis for some people, or when maybe diagnose yourself or your kid, it can feel all alone, and it can feel very isolating. Getting a part and being a part of those groups completely help that go away. So I'd say that's been a big part for me. And so I did all of these things before getting an official diagnosis. So therefore, when my son was officially diagnosed, so he has been in speech therapy he's been in speech therapy for under a year. I'd say it's been about 9 months that he's been in speech therapy, with breaks in between. Um, you know, breaks for holidays, spring break. That's the other thing. When you live in a non-capitalist country, there are so many like holidays and days off and whatever. People really celebrate rest here and breaks. So I've had to adjust with that. So I would say between all of it all, maybe it's been about 8 to 9 months that he's been in speech therapy, not even a year. And I mean, the turnaround has been amazing. The improvement, the involvement has been amazing. So he has been doing that. He's been in a Montessori school. I've been in my support group now since, I guess it's been about 7 months. All of these things were done before getting the official diagnosis. He just turned 5, and my husband and I were like, well, let's go ahead and just get this. We know he's autistic, but let's get it. And sure enough, we got the official diagnosis. Check right where we thought he was, and we were right. And it was not this earth-shattering experience. The rug wasn't pulled from under us, and I know a lot of parents do experience that. And so that's why I encourage you to take it by chunks, take it bit by bit. If your child has food aversions, and that's the most urgent thing because they're not eating or they're losing weight, address that first. If your child is pre-verbal, or they are verbal, but the communication is not where it should be, attack that. Attack the speech therapy. If you find that their motor skills, are really not there, then get an occupational therapist. But individualize, just get each thing and not overwhelm yourself so much first with the label. I will also say, and particularly for Black moms, it's already hard being a Black mama. But I do believe, especially in a Western culture, Western society, it's even more hard because we are dealing with so much apology politics, apologies about just being in our skin, right? Apologies for being in a space. So when you are in a restaurant, or when your kid is acting out, at school, and they are in particularly a white dominant society, you are already, whether you want to admit it or not, you're already kind of like, ooh, they staring at him because he Black. Oh, the Black child can't be doing this. Oh, this, oh, that. And so then when you add on top of that child is autistic or ADHD or in some form a part of the neurodivergent community, it can be really crippling. And then you have anxiety, and then you're overreacting, probably due to people bondage. I think it's really important as Black parents, to be very honest with you, to be in a society that allows you to feel free. So if you have an autistic child, you have an autistic child, but it's not because, oh, they're Black and autistic. So that's one thing I would say. Living on the continent, for me, I don't deal with that monster on my back like I did when I lived in Western society, of being very hypersensitive or hyper aware to the white gaze. That's just not a part of my, it's just not part of my body anymore. And so for Black parents, I also really encourage you as well. Now, this is going to be a controversial statement, but half of the hell that you may get a lot of times is from family members. Half of, the people that you may deal with, may be people that are really close in your inner circle that may make you feel uncomfortable. And I think that's one thing, I always say my children gave me two things. My eldest gave me courage, and my youngest brought me joy. My eldest really, really, really gave me a muscle to really do daring things and bold choices, but he gave me the gas behind it. So in areas in my own life where I didn't know boundaries, or it was hard for me to set my boundaries and stick firm to them, I do that with them. Man, I'm a body muscle builder at this point when it comes to that, right? I know how to do that, but because I'm doing it for someone that I know may not always be able to advocate for themselves in a way that obviously I can as his mom. And so I just encourage you, awesome moms, wear your awesome badge with honor. We are mothers of the most intellectual, intelligent, genius, empathetic children that are one day going to be adults with all those beautiful attributes. By no means am I saying it's easy being an awesome mom, but we do need to embrace it as it's what we were called to be. And out of all the moms in the world with this challenging job, we were chosen to mother the children that we're mothering. And so for those mothers out there that may be challenged with a new diagnosis or a new awareness of, I encourage you, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. If you can't do it for yourself, do it for your child. And I mean, that's wherever in the world. And that may be moving your kid to a different school, moving to a different county, moving to a different state, maybe moving out the country, but go where life is going to be better crafted for them, but certainly for you, because they can only be at their best if you are also at your best. And so that's all. There will be a part 2 of this because as an awesome mom, I want to continue bringing awareness and encouragement around this particular topic. Until next time, keep coloring outside them lines, mama. Live your life and raise your beautiful Black children outside of society's constructs and rule books for you. Till next time, peace, color.